Stand and Deliver. Hello and welcome to the Stand and Deliver comedy podcast with me, Rodders. It's been a while since I've done one of these, so I should probably tell you what it's about, and maybe if you're a new listener, it will be helpful, and also, perhaps it's just been so long since you heard one, you've forgotten. It's a podcast about comedy. I am a comedian, and I'm also the promoter of the Stand and Deliver Comedy Club, which resides up above Smoking Billy's Rib House in the centre of Reading. Or at least it did until very recently. Obviously, the comedy show is on a hold due to the UK being in lockdown. Now, I really hope this isn't breaking news to anyone, because this really shouldn't be your first place to go for up-to-the-minute news. I mean, I haven't done a podcast in months. Could you imagine that? Some bloke just going outside going, "Oh, why are all the shops closed? What's happened to the pubs?" Oh, dear. So here's the rundown of what's going on today's Stand and Deliver comedy podcast. It's usually a peek behind the curtain into the world of comedy, where we chat to some of your favourite acts. But obviously the world of comedy has kind of been put into utter disarray at the moment with all the gigs being off. But back in, last summer, August it might have been that long ago, before any of this mess happened, I sat down with Arna Spek backstage at Mates Rates Comedy. In fact, I think it was the show I was comparing, and we had a rather fascinating conversation. She was born in the Netherlands, came over to England, and did a degree in stand-up comedy at the University of Kent. It's pretty interesting because a lot of people say, "Oh, you can't teach stand-up comedy. It's got to be something that comes from experience and natural ability as well." But Arna isn't the only comedian that I know that did a degree. In fact, Andy Field, who has headlined Stand and Deliver at least twice, I think, he studied comedy at the University of Winchester. So we find out what exactly goes into a stand-up comedy course and whether it was actually any use and how it was useful. So that's quite an interesting thing to get into. And we also talk about the cultural difference in terms of audiences in the Netherlands and the UK. Both nations have very different sense of humours, so we examine that, and we hear about how she is somehow managing to juggle bringing up a child and stand-up comedy. She's recently had a baby. So I hope that my chat with Arna will take you all back to a time before any of this mess happened, and will sort of serve as a reminder that at some point normality will prevail. Comedians, you will be able to gig again, and audience members, you'll be able to come and audience again, or watch, or whatever the verb is. What I thought I would do, because that interview was recorded way back last summer, we should really also hear something a little more up to date. I thought I would bring a bonus guest onto the podcast, Iszi Lawrence. You might have heard her on Radio 4's Making History, or seen her pop up at the Stand and Deliver Comedy Club, or you might have read her new children's book, The Unstoppable Letty Peg. Now, the thing that me and Izzy both share, outside doing comedy, we both enjoy being active and doing our various niche sports and keeping fit through them. I enjoy rock climbing, and Izzy does jiu-jitsu. You're better off messing with me than messing with her, to be honest. Now, that aside, now obviously we're unable to participate in our sports as usual. I've come up with some ways of getting around that and still remaining active, and probably Izzy has as well. So let's find out how she's getting on. Hi, Izzy.
Hello, Rodri. How are you?
I'm not bad. I am surviving incarceration. Isolation.
Okay.
And I'm broadcasting from home.
Well, it depends. Is it incarceration? Are you wearing a tag?
Yes, but that's because I just forgot to take the label off when I went to Primark.
Oh, okay.
One of my favourite things when I was before I went to uni, I used to do a lot of bedroom radio before I got into the real radio, inverted commas, and I can't believe the age of bedroom radio has now come back thanks to this terrible pandemic.
The age of bedroom, everything's come back, I think. I mean, it's quite it's terrible, but also slightly, I don't know, I sort of feel the pressure's off a bit, that sort of thing, that we hold ourselves to really high standards, and now we can just be like, relax a bit.
Yeah, I don't have
like, do you ever do that? When you're on Twitter and you've just come back from a really lousy gig, and you see all of these people that you've known for ages, and they're all sort of like selling out at the Apollo and that sort of thing. And it's like, oh man, things aren't going. Nobody's selling out at the Apollo today. It's quite, I've got a Saturday off. It's a treat.
I guess it's a great leveler, isn't it? Everyone from every comedian from every level is now gigless, and I guess that's a really nice optimistic way of looking at it, because I was proper fed up about my comedy club being shut. I know in the big scheme of things that's a small problem, but it's my baby that I've looked after for 4 years, so it's a bit. I like your optimistic spin on things.
Well, you can't. I mean, I like it when you're out of control of stuff. It's when you're in control and it's your fault. I feel, that's when I feel the pressure. If I'm out of control of something, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm quite relaxed.
That's true.
There's nothing I can do.
I was quite grateful. My venue owner decided to pull the plug on the shows a little bit before, and didn't leave the decision to me, because that would have been the show must go on, which probably in hindsight would have been the wrong thing to do.
Well, I did a gig on the Monday night, so Monday 16th, when Boris Johnson did his big announcement saying we're closing all the pubs, do not go to the theatres, do not go to the clubs. He made that announcement as I was driving to my gig in Hemel Hempstead.
Whoops.
So I was like, interesting. So we got there and about a third of the audience turned up. So we decided to do the show very carefully. So what was really lovely was I don't know if you did this the last week of your gigs, of elbow bumping the compere as you walk on. It's
kind of pointless though, because you're all sharing the same grubby microphone.
I know, but it's just a quite nice way of saying hello to a compere. It's just sort of like elbowing them a bit. It's quite a nice little
token gesture
crossover.
towards hygiene, and it is less trick, because it's really easy to mess up a handshake, especially when
It's so easy. Or worse, a high five and you miss it.
Do you know the trick for that, Izzy? This will change your high fiving life if we're ever allowed to high five again.
Go on, tell me the trick.
Honestly, you just look at their elbow and you can't miss. Something about the alignment of your eyes.
And you just hit their elbow.
No, you don't. No, you don't. Honestly,
I would.
It sounds like rubbish, but it's true. I'm very dyspraxic, and now I can do a perfect high five.
Okay, if you say so.
It's true. I was till I tried it. So the gig went ahead.
The gig did go ahead, but slightly, a lot of us were a bit sort of sad. I was closing that night, and it was a bit sort of, everybody's a bit sort of like, what's going on? It's quite scary. But it was a fun little gig. I just felt bad for the staff there, as I still do.
Yeah, it's horrible, isn't it? Hospitality industry is not the industry to be in at the moment. And I was supporting the pubs right until the night before they all closed.
Okay. So I've
done my bit.
Excellent.
But I think we are in the same category, Izzy, be it people that, correct me if I'm wrong, that hated PE and that kind of thing at school, but now, later in our lives, we've found a sport that we like and are now more into fitness. Would you say that's correct?
I think that's perfectly. I made my PE teacher, poor Miss Coshot, I made her play me at chess in my last PE lesson of high school, because everybody else was proper good students, so they were in like school council, or they were off revising, and it was and I was still in lessons, so I made her play me at chess in the netball court. And she lost. So, but I was never very into sport, and then after. Yeah, I really got into it. Since I turned 30, I've really gotten into it. I've started jiu-jitsu. I've done a bit of pole dancing, and now, if you know the Shred Quarters, there's a little gym near where I live, and they're brilliant. And I just enjoy swinging a kettlebell around as well.
Yeah, all these things sound incredibly dangerous. I think
but you're a climber, aren't you?
Yeah, that is true actually. But I think there's certain manoeuvres, because I have friends that do the pole thing, and I think the scariest thing is when they invert and slide down the pole and stop just before their head touches the ground. That looks death-defying.
Well, it's fine. It's not so much smacking your head; it's removing all the skin off your thighs. That's the horrible thing. Is nobody really appreciates how bruised you get doing pole, and also how sort of like chafing it can be. So, and it's this really weird thing is if you want a pole that's easy to climb, you pick a nice thin pole, particularly if you're a woman because you've got smaller hands. So it's easier to grip a smaller pole. However, those ones dig into you horribly. So a big fat pole is much nicer for doing inversions, and that's the thing. Yeah. But it's technicalities.
Pole selection.
dangling upside down like idiots.
So,
But I do like that. I like the adrenaline of that. That's what I've kind of, because it's a bit like comedy. You know, we're stood on stage and we're doing something that's quite scary in many ways. And you get that little adrenaline hit. Same with pole, hanging upside down, sliding towards the floor. Same with jiu-jitsu, when you're being thrown over people's heads. It's all, you've got that adrenaline, which I think is quite, addictive.
I just really like the sensation of climbing, using muscles that you wouldn't normally use, and the whole, you get to see some beautiful parts of the world, and there's just so many variations. It's also a very, very sociable thing, and I guess jiu-jitsu must be quite sociable as well.
Incredibly sociable. You have to make friends. If somebody's running at you with a metal chain, or you have to run at somebody else with a metal chain, knowing that if you hit them, you're going to really injure them. So you have to trust that they will move offline. And when they do move offline, you're kind of doomed, because they're going to cook and argue you straight into the floor and nearly rip your fingers off trying to get the chain off you.
And similarly with climbing, somebody literally has your life on the end of a rope. So you better be nice to them. Yes.
Yeah, it's quite, but it is that sort of thing of going, all Jitsuka, we just make a lot of friends. So the entire time, we've still been doing jiu-jitsu classes in the lockdown.
Well, I was about to say, because my climbing centre has been shut, and the British Mountaineering Council, stupid beep, I'll say that sentence again. The climbing centre has been shut, and the British Mountaineering Council have told us not to go out climbing at this time, so we don't spread the disease even more.
Well, you see, you're saying that annoyed, but like if you get to the top of a really big cliff and you sneeze, that's a lot of people you can cover doing that.
That is
true. If you're
true.
Going down into a hole, you wouldn't actually, it'd be covered up. But no,
it is unfortunately totally necessary. But at the same time, I've lost my sport. You've lost your sport, although it doesn't sound like you have. How are you getting around the lockdown?
Well, we've lost the cool fun parts of sport. So we lost spinning through the air over our own heads and doing all the thumping and the stuff together. However, we are doing like Zoom meetings where we're all sort of getting together and working out and doing movements which are suitable for jiu-jitsu, so lots of lunging and doing lots of makikomi, pretending to sort of go into different throws and that sort of thing. So it's not jiu-jitsu, but it's still the same people. We're still saying, instead of saying stop, we still say yame. It's it's quite fun.
So you still have a bit of camaraderie and still actually get a bit of a workout.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's the same with the shred quarters as well. They've got lessons that they're doing online, and we all sort of, in the morning, they sort of, you're watching the people who usually they're shouting at you, not doing any exercise, doing all the exercise and getting very sweaty. So I had Gemma this morning and her flatmate, and they were outside in their garden jumping up and down, and I was jumping up and down in my living room with them. So it's not the same, but it's also,
the next
you don't
best
feel
thing,
as lonely.
isn't it? Yeah, no, that's...
Yeah.
Because the thing, I was very, very fed up with this whole thing day before yesterday, and the difference was I didn't do any exercise that day. But since then, I've managed to put up a fingerboard in the garden, which is it's a block of wood with various shaped holes. Not a finger skateboard, although I do still have my collection of finger skateboards. But it's a block of wood with holes in different sizes, so you hang off it and do pull-ups off it in order to train finger strength.
Oh, that sounds absolutely horrible.
So it is like a torture device, but I've put it up in my garden, and we have a WhatsApp client group called Quarantine Training, and we're all like swapping tips, and I've been sent an amazing free app which says, what do you want to train today? Core. So I did a core workout. I found this terrible exercise called a dish duck. Are you familiar with that?
Okay. I've never heard of a dish duck.
You're on your back, and it's like a sit-up, only your legs, you bring your arms over your head, then back to touch your legs as you come in. So it's like you're kind of hovering. It's one of those typical core exercises, and it's horrible. But right. I do feel my mood is dramatically lifted from doing this afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, doing any exercise is absolutely, I just think it's so important. And also when you're doing it with people, I think it's good. By the way, for everybody who's very, intimidated by all of the terminology that Roger's using, do remember that if you've never met Rogers, he's a very slight man and a very strong man all at the same time. You know, being able to lift yourselves up by your fingertips is not a requirement for doing any exercise. I just want to underline that. Nor is being a dish duck, although it does sound a bit like a hollow rock, but you're bringing your legs up. I'm confused.
I think there's probably various names for it, and climbing. Yeah. I think climbing just likes jargon.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you know, all of our stuff in jiu-jitsu's in Japanese, which isn't really Japanese because none of us have ever been, but it's as Japanese.
Yeah, you're right. I'm doing a lot of horrible climbing specific stuff, but you could equally get just as much endorphin and as much enjoyment out of a nice simple yoga workout. And there's lots of good yoga
doing
workout.
Yoga or Pilates, and yoga is horrible. For those people who think that yoga's easy, it's not. But you can obviously. You're very strong. It's just really, you know, we just hold the chaturanga for a minute. When your nose is an inch off the floor, it's it's not easy.
I mean, I'm not very good at it, and the trouble is when you see the people who know what they're doing, they make it look effortless, and it doesn't, they don't give away even with facial expressions how much like they're having to do. It's a bit of a trick, really, isn't it?
It is an absolute nightmare. I just can't. Crow in particular. If you want to hang upside down, just Google the word crow.
I can't do crow pose.
You should be able to though. It's just a matter of believing that your head won't hit the floor.
I miss doing acro yoga. When we do partner yoga, there's two of you doing headstands and handstands on each other, but obviously we can't do that. I've seen
your Insta, and you are working with gymnasts, it seems, half the time when you're doing stuff like that. It's amazing.
It's good fun, but we can't do that while this pandemic is on. It will make us appreciate all this stuff we all took for granted.
I'm making a list of people I want to hug.
Oh,
just go, who am I going to hug first and how long am I going to hug? I'm going to be like a limpet. It's going to be awful.
So have you got any, I've described to you my garden setup, which involved me actually doing some DIY. I was nearly a burden on the NHS when I was using a power drill. Luckily it went all right. Have you set up any ingenious contraptions or?
Well, I've got, because I don't have any like dumbbells and stuff. What I've been doing is when I'm doing my punches in the air, I've been holding some tin cans so I can do shadow boxing and punching with some tin cans in my hand. Also, I've put some weights. I've got some books in an old rucksack, so I can use that as a kettlebell that's a bit lighter, because I've got one very heavy kettlebell and one not so heavy kettlebell, and I need a medium one, so I use that instead of a medium-sized kettlebell.
Brilliant. So my friend,
rucksack with books in.
You should see my friend's makeshift climbing gym. He is filling big bottles that used to contain milk full of water and using them as weights and doing like weighted pull-ups and stuff. It's insane. It's classic. I mean, also in my garden, I haven't filled them yet, but I've got a couple of concrete planters which are brilliant for deadlifts. They're really heavy. I don't do any.
About 50 kilo.
I've never done any lifting of weights or that sort of thing.
Well, you've lifted yourself, and that's heavy enough. I think.
Well, especially after if I have the last week of not doing a great deal, and like last night I ruined it all by going on a digital pub crawl. I actually felt like I'd been on a night out when I woke up late this morning.
I find the trouble with doing these group chats and things like that is it's not very, because in a group what usually happens is it breaks up into 2 or 3 separate chats. And when you're all in one group, it never really works the same. It sort of, it doesn't feel as natural in that way. The way that when you're in the pub, so 2 or 3 of you talk at one end of the table, another 2 or 3 of you talk, and then you come together and you split off, and it's that element of it that I really miss.
Yeah, one of my friends actually prefers it. He said it's got all the good things about going to the pub, i.e. beer and chatting to people, but about all the horrible things, i.e. queuing and obnoxious people at the bar. So one of my friends prefers it.
That's well, I just think you've got to have a bit of obnoxious people at the bar, I think, and there's also it just feels a bit weird to be sort of getting drunk on your own in your living room.
I like the way that's becoming normalised now by this. That is another positive.
I know. It's going to be weird. The whole thing is very weird.
It's almost going to be, once we get used to it, it's almost going to be stranger, reverting gradually to normality.
I know, and then we got to go back to normal. It's going to be really odd. And like, what, we have to go to work? Do we?
Oh. They can't make us. We've talked working out and, the other thing that you do, which I think can carry on doing, because it's a very solitary pursuit. You are an author, and you've recently had a book.
I am an author, and I have been writing. I have been more researching than writing.
Well, your new book is called The Unstoppable Letty Peg. Now, without totally ruining the ending or anything, can you give us a brief synopsis?
Well, pretty much, it's basically Letty Peg. She's a kid, and all she really wants to do is make friends and not seem weird. But her parents make it difficult because her mum's a suffragette, her dad's a policeman. So the sort of fight for suffrage spills into her own home, and she follows her mum secretly, naughtily, to a protest, which turns out to be Black Friday, which is one of the most violent suffragette protests where the police really are beating up the women and the women are really fighting the police. And she gets rescued by Edith Garrett, and she learns jiu-jitsu. And in learning jiu-jitsu, she learns, basically to find out who she is as a person. She learns how to face her fears, and she learns how to help people when she can. She learns how to control her emotions and overcome her fear, basically. And the whole story is about the adventures of her, and really sort of, it's got lovely bits with it where you're talking about, the teacher being a really horrible man and her getting revenge. There's a lot of horse poo in this book. There is a lot of, because it was 1910, there were a lot of horses. That horse poo was in it. So if you don't like horse poo, you will hate this book. However, if you're a bit of a rose gardener, this is the book for you.
So some of the characters in this, so some of it's based on actual reality. There were suffragettes that were training jiu-jitsu, presumably to defend themselves against police.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's this sort of weird thing where most of the suffragettes want to be arrested. So it's this really sort of weird, because I go to schools and I sort of say to kids, how would you feel if you're a suffragette and you got arrested? And I'll be really sad. And then, I can flash up a picture of Annie Kenny looking absolutely ecstatic that she's getting arrested. Because if you're arrested, it means you're a political prisoner, and you can make a fuss and say, listen, this is how we've got to spread the word that women deserve the vote because we are fighting for this. And so they're very happy to get arrested until the government starts to change the rules and say that, well, if you're arrested, if you go on hunger strike, then we're going to release you without any protest. But as soon as you get better again, it's called the Cat and Mouse Act. They got them in again. So the suffragettes needed protection. And so to stop themselves being arrested, they employed the tactics of jiu-jitsu. So they also used things like Indian clubs. They also trained in Schwingen and a martial art for gentlemen called Bartitsu.
Oh, is that like fencing with brollies?
Yeah, exactly that. Fencing with walking sticks.
That's
and
incredible.
using your cape and your pocket watch and that sort of thing. It was invented by a guy called Edward Barton Wright, who also founded the Golden Square Dojo. And if you don't think you know Bartitsu, you do, because that is the martial art that Sherlock Holmes used to defeat people like Moriarty.
So you've done a little tour of schools, haven't you? You've taken the book into schools.
That's right.
What's the reaction from children? And I want to know, is this a book that boys are enjoying as well as girls?
Yes, it is, which I'm really happy about, because it is one of these things where, you ask a little girl can read a book about a little boy and it's absolutely fine. But, little boys are much more progressive than you think. I mean, loads of little boys' favourite book is Matilda. That's the, Roald Dahl's Matilda. It's hugely popular with boys. And just because it doesn't contain many boys doesn't mean it's not for boys. It's a bit like, Harry Potter. Girls can read Harry Potter and don't get obsessed and sidetracked by Hermione existing. I do think as well that it opens it up and it sort of makes it, I try what, Letty's sort of, because she's a child in 1910. She doesn't care if women get the vote or not, really, because she's not a woman, she's a girl. What does she care? And so it's explaining to her why she should care, but also explaining to her that the reason women don't have the vote isn't just misogyny. It's also the fact to do with people being scared of change, and also the fact to do with people in power not wanting to lose that power. And a lot of it is, it's something that boys can really relate to as well, particularly the violence, because there is quite a bit of violence.
That is always fun. So it's not a book where the boys will feel blamed for the suffering of the suffragettes.
Gosh, no.
That's good.
No, not at all. I mean, in many ways, no. I don't think there's hardly the only baddie, the real baddie. There's a teacher who's a baddie, which is fair enough. But the real baddie, the culprit, as far as Letty Peg sees it, the man who's responsible for all of her woes, is a man called Winston Churchill. I don't know if you've heard of him,
you might have done.
He's a terrible man.
So the book has a bit of a go at someone who is a hero to many.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, Winston Churchill, definite hero. But in 1910, he was the Home Secretary, and he made a lot of decisions that resulted in suffragettes being injured and suffragettes suffering quite a lot, and delays to women getting the vote, which he did possibly for pragmatic reasons, possibly because he didn't really care either way. But it's one of these interesting things that a one-time hero can also be a villain, depending on the glasses you are wearing when you're looking at them. But certainly in 1910, I would not have been a fan of Winston Churchill in 1910.
Because in school, I definitely studied the suffragettes, but I don't know if they kind of whitewashed over that bit. I don't remember Churchill.
Well, yeah, exactly. I did.
Seems silly.
I studied in school. They were really boring because all they did was starve themselves and get run over by horses. And what? I don't care about this.
They set fire to letterboxes.
This is true, but they didn't really, we didn't talk about the exploding letterboxes. We didn't talk about the fact that most of them set fire to themselves by accident. We didn't talk about all of the messages that they sort of burnt into cricket grounds and burning down houses and cutting phone lines and Well, I think we mentioned the window smashing at school.
But it was terrorism.
No, seriously, women were banned from most galleries and museums in London and throughout the country. In order to get into the British Museum and the British Library in 1910, you had to have a man escorting you who's responsible for you, or you had to have a letter written by your doctor or a gentleman to let them know that you were all right and you weren't going to smash everything.
That's
so it's quite women were seen as dangerous.
Yeah, well, it sounds like they were. Give them the vote, for goodness sake. Stop blowing things up. Unbelievable. So is it the sort of story where you can do another adventure of Letty Pegg, or is it
I think so. I do think so, and I do hope so. So, I mean, basically, it's one of these things where, the publishing industry is the publishing industry. So I really hope that enough kids like it to want a second copy. I mean, if you want to find out more about it, do go to my website if you're interested. It's izzi.com. That is ISZI.com. And if you if you clink the book link, if you click the book, clink the book lick, that would be wrong.
That's
click the book link on izzi.com, ISZI.com. You'll see The Unstoppable Letty Pegg. But you can get it from, I think they've got a sale at Bloomsbury at the moment, but you can get it on any bookshop.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sparing the time, Izzi, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
This is the Stand and Deliver Comedy Podcast with Rodders.
That was Iszi Lawrence. I found that very cathartic, talking all about how we're still trying to keep active whilst all this horrible lockdown stuff's going on. So that was good. And we even got a bit of suffragette escapism as well. And I've just realised that the exercise I was referring to as a dish duck is actually a dish tuck. I feel like a right idiot. Another excellent dyslexic moment. Now, just before we get on to our main guest, Arna Spek, I thought I'd try and rack my brains and try to remember the last gig I did. Looking at my diary now, it was back on Monday the 9th of March in Battersea at Right Funny Comedy. Now, despite it being a Monday night gig, it was pretty much a full house, and there was even a magazine photographer who was snapping pics whilst we were on stage. And I remember this being a really exciting evening for me because I'd just very recently done a comedy workshop with Sean Morley. Now, I've got no formal training in comedy, and I thought, well, it's probably about time I did. And my comedy is sort of steadily drifting towards doing more improv and surreal stuff, and I thought that I'd have some courage and actually try and kick it in that direction and just see what happens. And if you haven't seen Sean Morley, the word unique is really overused now, but he truly is a unique act, a master of audience manipulation and true improv. And in fact, you can see his entire headline set from when he was at Stand and Deliver on our YouTube channel. If you just type into YouTube, Stand and Deliver Comedy, look for the Sean Morley video. The whole 20-minute set is there, and I do urge you to watch it. It is fascinating and funny in equal measure. Now, the workshop, without giving too much away, because obviously Sean will want to start opening up this class again once he's able to. I don't want to ruin the ending. That'd be really, really rude, wouldn't it? It's worse than ruining a film, because I'd be ruining his class. But it was called Scriptless Stand-Up, and the whole sort of message was that a lot of comedy nowadays seems quite stilted and scripted because it's packaged as if it's definitely going to go on the radio or the television, and kind of ignores the main advantage of comedy is that it's a live form of entertainment and your audience are right there in the same space as you. So why not harness that and take advantage of that? And that can be as simple as sort of pointing out and doing stuff based on the fact you're in a weird room, because it's been a lot of times you're not in a pristine art centre, you're in a weird part of a pub or whatever in the middle of nowhere. So why not turn those obstacles into advantages? And he also said a lot how many comedians, when they do improv, they'll improvise something on stage and then they'll write it down and it just becomes yet another bit, and then will obviously lose its fluidity and spontaneity. So he talked a lot about how to make sure things were truly improvised. Now, what did amuse me was that it's called scriptless stand-up, and one of the first things we did in the workshop was a writing exercise, which I thought was brilliant. But honestly, it's such a worthwhile workshop. It's made me really excited about performing, and now I really, really can't wait to get back to it because I had 2 gigs after the workshop, and Sean set us homework after the class, and he said that we had to go and try out the techniques we'd learnt and then send him a recording, and only then would we be released. And yes, so I had 3 gigs immediately afterwards. In fact, 2 gigs were the day of the workshop, so that was very handy. And then I had that 1 gig in Battersea that I just told you about. And it was so exciting to go up there and know roughly what you wanted to happen, but no real idea how you were going to get there. And it made me feel like a new comic again in a very good way. I got those butterflies, and it was just so exciting. So yeah, it was good to end on not only a high. If I was gonna, I mean, I'm glad my last gig didn't go horribly wrong. But not only was it good to end on a bit of a high, but also end in a way where I think I might actually be finding the style of comedy that suits how I am. So that's very exciting and encouraging. Now, it's probably time we got to our main event. Our headline act on the podcast is Arna Spek from the Netherlands, works at the British Museum, and is an all-round fascinating person. This was recorded last summer backstage at Mates Rates Comedy. In fact, it might have been the show I compared. And we started talking just as the place was being packed up after the show. This is Arna Spek.
This is the Stand and Deliver Comedy Podcast.
My mind's a blur. Were you first in the second half, second in the third? I can't remember now.
I was second in the second half, so...
It's worrying I've forgotten that because I was emceeing this afternoon. But it was quite a fun show today. It was quite warm. The audience were sleepy at first, but I think they woke up. Did you enjoy them?
Yes, I think the acts really were brilliant. So they really woke them up, as you say. It was a lot better than I thought a Sunday afternoon comedy show would go. So yeah, definitely enjoyed it.
It is a worry because outside Edinburgh, you don't get many afternoon shows, so you do wonder what they're going to be like. So have you ever done an afternoon show before? Many of them?
That's a good question. No, other than like on fringe festivals. I don't think I've... No, that's not true. I did a cake show that was deliberately on a Sunday afternoon, but they made all their cakes for the audience, so that was pretty exciting.
Oh my goodness, I've only ever been to one comedy show that does cake. It's, weirdly enough, it's called Coffee, Cocktails and Jokes, and the promoter will ask you the night before, what sort of cake do you want? Absolutely bizarre. How long have you lived in the UK? Because you started, obviously, from the Netherlands.
Yes.
You've been over here yonks and yonks, I guess?
For about 15 years now, I think.
So did you start comedy over there, or did you start it when you were here?
I started it in the Netherlands. I'm one of those people, that just was always part of the stage one way or another. But there's not really a traditional stand-up in the Netherlands. So I did a lot of what you call cabaret, which is sort of sketchy... kind of comedy, lots of funny songs. It's a lot more theoretical than stand-up is.
So how long ago roughly was this? Was it when you were at university there, or what? Or did you always do performing when you were at school?
Yeah, so definitely at school. I don't know about yourself. Were you there on stage?
I was in the. I could never remember lines, so I'd always be in the chorus. And like the biggest role I ever had in a school play, I was the second judge in the Crucible, and I came in at the wrong time. and they were all actors, so they couldn't improvise. So the whole thing just ground to a halt, and I've never felt more guilty in my life. I ruined the Crucible.
But I bet it was funny to the audience. But
not really, no. I just had a ground to. It's funny now, but I was like, admittedly, I should have hopefully remembered my lines, but like surely they could have improvised around it. It wasn't like the biggest spanner in the works. I didn't suddenly change character and turn it into a musical. I just came in at slightly the wrong time. That was it. And actors can't seem to cope with these sort of things. Where was your first gig?
So my first stand-up was at university in England. So at school in Holland, we used to do at the end of term like performances where anyone could do anything that you wanted. So
it was like a review show kind of thing.
Exactly,
What do you do? Were you doing sketches and stuff in that?
Yeah, just write my own rubbish, which was really rubbish. It's not, false modesty. It was really rubbish. It was like what I thought was funny in those days, and then just embarrassed myself for my entire school years. And then at secondary school, two friends of mine, we got a little group together which was called L-Star, after the apple, and we did sketches. And then I went to university in Amsterdam, and then 1 year in England, thinking it was going to be 1 year, and to study comedy actually. And I studied at the University of Kent, where you could study comedy, which...
That's amazing. I only know one other person. Andy Field is another comic I knew that did a comedy degree.
All right, yeah.
So it seems like, because I've never done a formal comedy course. I paid for some tuition a while back, but I'd never really... So, like, was it useful? Because some people, there's arguments, isn't there? Some people say, oh, you can't teach it. And other people say, well, no, you very much can. And you've got people in the middle going, well, no, you've got to have the comic instinct, but then they can teach you all the fine-tuning. So where do you stand on that kind of spectrum?
Yeah, I think I'm in the middle. I think there's some things of comedy you can very much learn, but there's always something that is instinct or talent, as they call it, and inspiration, that gets you that extra bit further. So I think, especially for me, it was to get up on stage and by myself and talk to people that directly. It was really nice to get that little bit of extra help from a comedy course. But I can also see how you can totally not need a comedy course at all. It's very simple if you're that gutsy in a way.
So I did a philosophy degree. So when I was handing in essays and going to seminar groups, was your homework to go and do a gig? Like how does the course work?
So the comedy was part of just a drama degree. So we looked at sometimes certain times of comedy, like we looked at all the radio comedy from the 1950s, and then had to make one ourselves and then write an essay of our experiences and research and stuff. That was really fun. I mean, I'm not going to lie, it was really fun. I don't think I would ever get a job out of it, but it was really good. And then towards the master that I actually did was in sort of comedy research, as we called it. So we would try certain like punk comedy or try to really provoke the audience or work with the limitations of comedy. So I did, as my master show, an entire gig in Dutch for an English audience, and then wrote...
did any of them speak English? Or was that the point, that they didn't?
That was the point.
So I mean, it is an intrinsically funny-sounding language, so I guess that puts you ahead of some languages. I mean, did you have to do a lot of physical stuff? Because I guess you can judge where punchlines are, so you'd sort of know when to laugh. That must have been... Do they know what they were getting, the audience?
Yeah.
So they kind of knew what they signed up for?
I mean, depressingly, it was probably one of the best gigs I've ever done. It was so interesting as well, because I don't know about you, but like the idea of comedy has always really fascinated me, which is why I wanted to do that degree. Why do we laugh, and what does make people laugh, and what happens when you laugh, and that kind of stuff. So what works best during that Dutch show was I had slides and then talked in Dutch about the slides, and so the audience knew roughly what I was talking about. And then sometimes laughed because they didn't get me, sometimes laughed because they got me as well, what I was saying, or just the confusion, or like you say, the words of something. Interacting with people as well in Dutch when they got a bit scared, I guess, of the fact that I was talking in a language they didn't understand, and then everybody had to laugh about that tension that appeared. So that kind of thing. It didn't all work. Don't get me wrong. Like there were some little bits that totally didn't land. But
did you do crowd work? That's my
yeah, absolutely, and it worked so well because the people were bonding in this idea that they had no idea what I was saying. So the audience really felt like one group. It was very interesting, and it was a really good gig. Yeah,
that's really, really bizarre. I guess because my only sort of research into why we do comedy and stuff is from Jimmy Carr's The Naked Jape, and it goes on about how laughter's like a release of tension, going back to when we were all apes and stuff. But if you look at its bare bones, it is an odd thing, stand-up. Like someone just stands there, tells silly stories in order to elicit a really specific response.
Yeah.
So what was your like key finding from doing your masters? Did it ruin comedy a bit for you because now you've seen why we do it?
Not for me. It got even more interesting, which is one of the reasons why I started doing gigs outside university. Was just because I found it like coming from a more theoretical way of doing comedy. The idea of stand-up, of just having nothing and just such a direct contact with the audience, is amazing, and I really liked it. And I don't know, but if you ever have a great gig, it's something so, like, the energy that goes around is so magical. It's almost like a drug in a way, isn't it? And you can, those feelings when you improvise something and it really lands, and it's just it's like hitting a goal or something. It's amazing. So for me, it just opened all these more ideas and avenues to think about comedy, and I started to really like it. So that's why.
It feels very empowering when it works, doesn't it? And I guess a lot of acts you'll see, they'll do badly regardless because their material can be great, but if they don't strike up a rapport with the audience, that it doesn't matter how good the pun is, they just won't fly.
And I think that was one of the things that I learned during my masters. There, as much as you can research comedy, there is something that you just can't put your finger on it. It's the more you research it, the more it's like this, it keeps slipping away. There's so many elements that you think, okay, good comedy is good jokes, but it's good jokes told by the right people in the right way, at the right time, in the right audience, right? There's all these little things that are just, that are so difficult to get.
So the master's course was part writing essays and stuff, and then part actually having to go out and do stand-up.
Absolutely, yes. And then especially playing with the format of comedy, so doing something. One of my fellow students that year, for instance, tried to hurt himself on stage and see how far that got. So that was interesting.
I think, what was he doing? Hitting himself a bit of wood? What was he doing?
Yeah, his idea was, so slapstick is funny. Why is slapstick funny? When does it become not funny? And, so he just got... he just started to hit himself on stage.
Was the answer when it drew blood?
Yes, a lot earlier than that, to be honest. So,
oh my goodness.
So those kind of things, that's what we were playing with. So it was very interesting.
I mean, I wanted to do well with my degree, but I would never have maimed myself for it. That was insane. Yeah. So I guess these performances, did you have to promote them yourself, or did you manage to get on other bills? Because then you'd have to learn to be a promoter, which is another skill in another world entirely.
You know, right? Yeah. No, so these gigs were always organised by the university on campus by our teacher, by our mentor. But we were told to go out and gig. We had to do a certain amount of gigs outside and then write about them. So that was also very interesting. Yeah, just to go out and try it in different places. Yeah, my very first gig, if you'd like to know, was at university, and I forgot all my jokes.
Oh, it's awful. That happens intermittently with me now. It's horrible. It's like the ground's open and everything. Yeah. Well, I'm up there with nothing. I've got no armour. I've got... Oh, God, no.
Exactly. And I just heard myself say, I forgot all my jokes, which, funny enough, got a laugh, because people were like, oh, okay. And I'd been watching Eddie Izzard a lot at that time, and... because it was about 2008 and he was the biggest thing in comedy at that time, and he did this sort of or do I not? So straight away, as I said, I forgot all my jokes, I said, no I don't, and I got another laugh, and so I kind of kept it going, which therefore was not that bad.
Did that give you time to then actually remember your joke? Brilliant. Good
Yeah,
trick.
exactly. So for my very sort of first 20 or so, I knew I had a way out, that if I ever didn't remember, I would just say, oh, I forgot all my jokes. And I go, no, I didn't. And so it became part of my set.
So did you find out from this Masters why comedy happens? Because I don't really question it, I just go along and do it these days.
Well, there is a very unfunny book of Freud, which is like hilarious. The fact that Freud writes about comedy, but none of his examples are actually funny.
He'd be the worst heckler in the club, wouldn't he?
And you're like, okay, Freud, I get what you're saying, but actually I don't, because I don't find funny the example that you just mentioned. I think... But I like the mystery. I like the fact that there is always parts of comedy that is just sort of ungrabbable, untouchable, which is fantastic. But so yes and no, I didn't get an answer other than that I really like it, and more than I want, and that I reckon it's very unhealthy for people who do it. I do recognise that. But
do you reckon it's about moderation? Do you mean because of all the late nights and all the just obsessing on something, or?
I think people who go out by themselves, usually in a pub, to talk to other people, and do that about 2 or 3 times at night in a week. Sorry, so that tells you that there's probably something slightly wrong with us, basically.
I wonder. I don't think, isn't it just a nice thing to want to make people laugh? I don't think anything wrong with that.
But I think also there are many reasons to do comedy, to be honest. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, some people like the attention, other people like the fact that you're connecting with the audience. For me, that's mainly the thing, just to sort of laugh together kind of thing. Other people just use it as a vent, isn't it? As a sort of a free therapy kind of way.
And that's a really thing I struggle with. I think that's a really weird, but I think if somewhere you haven't got the prime goal of just making people laugh, then it's kind of a bit wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. But I find comedy is a weird form of self-expression. That is, I'm always looking for how personal should I make it, and that kind of things that I sometimes struggle with. That I don't know. In the beginning, a lot of my jokes were just things that had happened to me that I told my friends, who then laughed, and then I tried it on stage and then made it bigger or something. But then not a lot of funny things happened to me anymore. So then I had to come up with something else. And I don't know about you, but writing comedy is just shit, isn't it? It's really hard.
Yeah, it is. I'm trying to make myself write more, and it's working to a degree, but annoyingly I find I get better laughs when I just improvise. So I'm hoping my writing will catch up to my improv. And also I kind of try and do half-half, like I'll have something half written, I'll go out there, I'll see what happens, and then I'll keep talking till hopefully there's a punchline, and then, or if I ad-lib something, I'll then write it down verbatim and then go and try it out and then do it that way. So I do a bit of sort of writing on stage, but now I'm trying to do some more formal writing, but I kind of resent it because I don't want it to be like school. I don't want comedy to be, it's meant to be escapism. I don't want it to be like homework.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And with me as well, I usually come up with something that feels slightly funny, and then you go out and you do it until it's funny, really, isn't it? So you just keep trying and trying, because the best writing I do is always on stage. It's always something I accidentally say.
So you don't write stuff verbatim?
You mean like sitting behind a desk kind of thing? No. Well, I try, like you, I try. Or do you do it? Or
I do it bits and bobs. Like I had a gap, I did quite a few gigs yesterday, so I had a few hours to kill in a coffee shop, so I wrote down some stuff, and part of the time me writing is just going through all my notes and finding something I wrote and then forgot about 2 or 3 months ago, and then I'll try and make it work. So it's very hard just to sit down there and do it. And like I said, part of me, like one of my friends just said, oh yeah, I'm not doing many spots in Edinburgh because I'm going to try do more writing. I just like saying, what a nerd, like you've gone hundreds of miles, there's all this great stuff, and you're just going to be sitting there on your laptop. But at the same time I recognise that to get better, I'm probably going to have to get better at writing. There's a very annoying, there's conflict in me about it.
But isn't that interesting as well about comedy? Because sometimes, the best performers are the worst writers, and the best writers are the worst performers, isn't it? It's the hard part. You have to be both. But yeah, I'm the same. I find the writing really hard and really not very fun. It's much more fun just to do it half-heartedly and then try it on stage, I think. And that's when the best stuff happens. But But then sometimes I think you need both. You need that moment of sitting down on the desk to come up with ideas of what you want to talk about. Because as well, today we had so many different styles, didn't we? So many. That was really fascinating as well, the way that people approach it and what works for them. With the Swiss lady who was so like a character.
On Frank Kissling, yeah. Frank Kissling's really interesting because it's just like, it is obviously very scripted, but at the same time it can adapt, and she can adapt to whatever goes on. It's like she sort of sets the parameters, and when within that she can completely control what the audience are doing. So it's kind of, that's kind of both. And without wanting to, I don't want to spoil any of her gags in case anyone goes to see her at some point soon, but the Swiss quiz always cracks me up. It's and we had there wasn't just one style. I don't think one style, weirdly enough, that was missing. There was no just straight jokes. There was no old school knock one-liners kind of thing. That is that dying now? Is that dying out?
No, I don't think that will ever die out, to be honest. But it's a really hard form of comedy because, to do 20 minutes of one-liners, you need a lot of one-liners. But I was really thinking about Fran as well. It was like, she's fantastic. I really enjoyed her stuff. But then, when you go to like Edinburgh and you think, okay, so you're going to do an hour. Could you do an hour of that stuff? Could you do an hour of a character? Would people find it interesting? Because I always think comedy is also about just interest. It needs to be interesting, which is why our headliner tonight, Paul, was very interesting at the same time, because he combines it with history, with archaeology, and therefore people find it interesting straight away, hopefully.
Yeah, no, Paul Duncan McGarity, that is, and the acts I like the best are the ones that blur the line between improv and material, so you can't really tell. I think like Paul Foot is my absolute favourite act of all time, and he kind of does that, and it's only through seeing the same set of his a couple of times you can see where the join is. Otherwise, it's just like the first time you see it, you have no idea. Like, he normally does these ridiculous long false starts. 10 minutes in, he goes, well, we might start the show in a minute. It's just like... And actually, that's quite tightly scripted, you discover when you see him for a second time. But then there's other bits that seemingly come out of nowhere. So there's still this big mystery. I still don't know what he actually has written down on a bit of paper somewhere, and what he just he just pulls out of thin air. So that's what I'd like to be able to do, is completely blur the join between material and improv. Sometimes I can do it, but often it's like you can see a join, it's a bit clunky.
Yeah, absolutely. Just... Yes, I think, to have your set stuff that is good, that works, and then to improvise around it, that's what I would like to do one day. That's sort of that would be ideal, to go that style.
You've written an hour, haven't you, or a half hour?
Well, I tried. Yeah. What is interesting for 10 minutes is not interesting for half an hour. You need to somehow open up to the audience. That's what I've learned, I think. They need to get to know you. Whether it's you as the character, that's fine, but they somehow need to get to know what's going on with you to keep it interesting. So last year I went to Edinburgh for the very first time. I had a show at 12 o'clock at midnight.
That can be okay. That can be okay. Was it or not?
I mean, it was definitely an experience, and it was. I had some good shows and some bad shows. So I think just a normal Edinburgh experience, to be honest. It's just that I did a show about museums, and I called it Museum Peace, which maybe it's not the audience for 12 o'clock midnight. They don't really care about. But then at the same time, because I had such a niche show, the people who were looking at 12 to come, they would come to my show because it made sense. They knew what I was talking about. So actually, I got very good audience because everybody had an idea of what I was going to say. I was going to talk about museums.
I guess that already filtered out the rowdy, drunk football lads, because they know them. That's quite a good way of deterring them, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So I had not the biggest of numbers, but those who were there were usually really, really up for it. So that was really good. Plus, the weirdest experience ever of standing in Edinburgh streets at like 11:30, and then somebody coming up asking if I was going to talk about the database of the museum, which was like, I beg your pardon. I was like, are you going to talk about Mimsy? I was like, you mean Mimsy the database Mimsy? It's like, yeah, it's really crap.
So So you actually used to work in museums, didn't you? Is that
I
the
do,
case?
yeah, I
still
do.
do
Yeah,
now?
that's my day job,
Which one?
The Museum of London.
No, I have been there.
Have you?
Yeah, hasn't it had like a mega refurb within the last 5 years?
Very soon. Yes,
I remember seeing the Queen's Golden Carriage there. That's impressive.
Yes.
And All Rocks. Is that what it's
Yes,
called?
very
Big
good.
not medieval. Prehistoric big tusked
cow.
thing.
Yeah.
Is that still there?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I
Good.
think all visitors should be like you, because most visitors come and ask where the dinosaurs are, and you're like, yeah, in the British Museum.
Oh, damn it.
No, actually, in the Natural History Museum. I say it wrong myself.
At London Zoo, I did ask the keeper where the elephants were, and they said Whipsnade. I was like, whoops.
Yes, but it was a good experience. So yeah, go and do it. But to write an hour is very differently. It's a lot. It's such a
So
different.
were you doing a full hour, or was it slightly less with some support acts?
It was slightly less.
Yeah.
And I did a support act, and I got a really bad review from Chortle for it. So, but a really good review.
I read that. When the main criticism seemed to be the fact it was a compilation show, you had a support act.
Which was only 10 minutes of it. But sure, okay, fair enough.
I thought that was just like... I find it really weird, the idea that you'd ever just put on a show that was 40 minutes or 30 minutes.
Yeah.
My instinct from running a comedy club is take an hour and then give them a show with a couple of people in.
Yeah.
I just think that... and also at gigs, I'm always... or like music gigs, I'll always turn up and watch the support act, because it's part of value for money.
Yeah.
So the fact you gave them a bit more value for their bucket money, I thought that was a bit of an odd criticism.
Yeah, well, I thought the criticism he gave me was very good in terms of I agreed with most of what he said. But what I thought was a bit unfair was like, I've got a full-time job, and I'm doing this somewhere on the side. It was 12 o'clock at midnight in Edinburgh in front of 10 people, and he compares you to people like Eddie Izzard, and it's like it's that.
I guess the reviewers just have to look at what they've got, because if they were listed all the mitigating circumstances, they'd have to go, maybe they had a cold, maybe they didn't sleep well the night before, so maybe I'll give them 4 stars. You know what I mean? Maybe that's how they have to do it.
That's true. Yes, that's true. But yeah, so that was also an experience really, to get a bad review. Yeah, but it's a good experience, Edinburgh, but I wouldn't do it straight away again, let's say it that way.
It's a nice mechanic, though, for, like, a gig, like unfortunately, there's already a venue called the Museum of Comedy, but the fact that you're a curator collecting weird specimens, and you bring on all these weird acts, and then you do a load of stuff about museums, and you bring on another artefact. It just seems really interesting. So another question I have: do you think that? So you said there wasn't much stand-up in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Was it mostly cabaret? And do you think that certain countries, because there seems to be tons and tons of stand-up comedy in America and in the UK.
Yeah.
Was that in your masters? Did you find out why some countries just don't seem to have it? And if they do, it was brought there by expat Brits, like in a lot of European cities. It was brought there. Some of them just it's expats doing it.
Which is exactly what happened in Holland. So when I grew up, which is a very long time ago, there was no stand-up at all. But now there is a stand-up community there, but it's mainly English people. Although slowly now it's starting to grow. I think it's just a culture thing. That's like, I think every culture has a form of comedy that is already existing, and it kind of fits with other things that they have in their culture. So the Dutch are very used to opinions and giving your opinion. So their comedy is almost like preaching a lot of the time. It's just, and people don't particularly say a good show is hilarious, as in English people, who just sort of on the floor laughing. In Holland, a good show can be someone who had made a very good case about something and slightly made you laugh about it.
That's amazing. So they're not. So when they go to is it billed as a comedy night? When they go there, so they're not necessarily disappointed if it doesn't make them laugh, as long as it engages them.
Yes, they
I need to gig there. I've said lots of interesting but not funny things.
Yeah, well, this is the Dutch thing. Like, I've met so many other comedians who went to Amsterdam and gigged there, and were like, weird audience. They just applaud, and they don't really laugh. They go, "Oh, see what you did there," kind of thing, and they're not really very generous laughter as such. It's just the Dutch are quite restricted, I think, in their emotions anyway, a bit different, and therefore laughing is is okay, and they laugh, and we've got some really good funny people in Holland. Like, don't get me wrong, there are some really funny examples, but it always has to have a certain look on society. It has a certain opinion that you need to make at the same time, because otherwise it's kind of wasted.
So it can't just be gags, it needs to be backed up by some sort of really solid logic. Is that what they're after?
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to do a lot of work, actually.
Yeah, so in Holland, a gag of like, knock knock, who's there, is just like, no, they just go, no, that's just what you're doing. But telling people how the Prime Minister currently is really shit is really considered the ideal.
I guess as long as it's backed up with lots of facts and data.
Exactly, yes. And you have to make it funny, like, it needs to be funny.
You can't just be interesting.
Yeah.
So they sound a very, very smart audience on the whole.
It is.
I mean, the Brits are quite, especially down south, it's got a reputation for these. You see gigging, they are quite reserved, and some audiences you get, they'll come up to you afterwards and say, "Oh, really good show," but it's like, well, they didn't laugh. Yeah. And then you go, have you gigged up north? You must have gigged up north, like Liverpool, Manchester, around that type of area. They are so loud. Even if you get as far up as Birmingham, they're suddenly so much more louder and open. It's like
so much more appreciative. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just the South, to be honest.
Yeah.
But they can go to a comedy gig almost every night, so they don't really appreciate it as much maybe as in the North. I don't know. Maybe this is a huge statement that's wrong, but that's always my feeling. Like, the people there are so much warmer because they really want you to do well. But yeah, it's a bit like that. But the Dutch are very generous in different ways. But that's what I like about England, and that's what I like about gigging in England, because people are so generous, and you just can just have fun, just fun, just having a laugh. That's what it's all about. Well, I've never really been Dutch. That's my problem.
Oh, brilliant. Well, you've been adopted by the Brits now, it seems. So, almost. What's coming up then? So, have you got any plans? Not doing Edinburgh this year, but
so I've got a daughter now, so she's only just 1, so I'm taking it easy and just giving like little gigs a go, and using August to have more gigs because people are all up in Edinburgh, and just looking for fun gigs, really.
That's hard though, isn't it, balancing having a family and then, because you don't want to give up comedy totally, but at the same time you've got responsibilities. I guess you try to keep your hand in when you can.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Then, well, maybe she's a bit older, and then you'll have a bit more time, then suddenly you can jump back on it again and not be totally rusty, I guess.
Exactly, that's exactly what I'm trying to do in the way that, my daughter, because it's really unfair, because so much things are happening in my life now that could be really funny, or that I, if I had time to do more gigs, could be a fantastic show. It's just I haven't got the time.
Write it all down. Scribble it all down, and you'll have this massive notebook. When you finally get the time, you'll have when she's at university or whatever, you're suddenly like, well, you'd have this 2-hour show.
So, Mummy is going to do some comedy now. So, I think that's true in a way. Just trying to keep it warm and trying to enjoy myself, really. I think sometimes the comedy community forgets that part. What do you think? Just having a good time is very important.
I think so. I think there's a contradiction. I think comedians can take comedy too seriously, and then if you take something that's meant to be fun, serious, obviously you have to put work in, but if you take something that's meant to be really fun and a bit of escapism seriously, it suddenly stops being fun, and then you stop being funny, and then I think some comics go on a spiral like that.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but like the first couple of years when I did comedy, I was really like serious and focused, and I wanted to do really well, and I was really disappointed if I wouldn't get to another stage in a comedy competition or something. But then after a couple of years, I just relaxed and just started to do the stuff that I thought was fun, and I actually got better because you're more relaxed and you're.
I find the more short term I've been, if I can just get that joke to work, and if I don't worry about the big picture, then it's. But I found that when you first start, even just getting up there, regardless of how you're just getting up there, is this massive achievement. And then when you've been doing it a little while, you look around at all the other amazing acts who've been going like 20 years, and you think, oh, why can't I do that? And then you get frustrated, and then so it's easy to get your head a bit stuck in it all.
Yeah, and I think, peaking too early is definitely not what you want either, in a way of like, I don't care if I'm going to do comedy 10 or 15 years, as long as I enjoy it. If it will ever get me somewhere where they want to pay me, that would be fantastic. But if not, I'll just do what I find fun and see where it leads me. my daughter is really fun as well. So I'm sure we'll make a great show out of everything that's happening in my life right now. But that's what they said, isn't it? The comedy is what was it? Trauma plus time or something like that.
I think tragedy plus time. Trauma's a bit dramatic. Amazing. So I think we conclude.
Having kids with trauma, but in a way, that is what something like that happens, and I'm sure I'm going to have lots of fun with it one day. So
I think in conclusion, comedy's great, but there is other stuff in life, so don't forget all that lot. Arna, thanks very much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
This is the Stand and Deliver Comedy Podcast.
That was Arna Spek. Cheers for sparing the time, Arna, and also cheers to Nick Byard, a Reading comic who runs Mates Rates Comedy. Not only did he let me compare that show, but he also basically let me use his gig as a private recording studio for this podcast. So cheers, Nick. Well, this is normally the time I'd tell you when the next show is and who we've got coming up. And to be honest with you, we don't know when the next show is, but there will be one. We just don't know when. But the show must go on online. We are trying our best to bring you as much content as we possibly can. I say we, it's mostly been intern Reggie. We have gigabytes and gigabytes worth of footage because we record most of the comedy shows, and with the artist's permission, we are uploading these to our YouTube channel. Stand and Deliver Comedy Club, just put that into YouTube and we pop up. It's also worth following us on Twitter at S&D Comedy, and look us up on Facebook as well. We're posting as much stuff on the channels as possible. And to be honest, it's mostly intern Reggie that's been doing this, not me, so I've got to give him some credit. And he also single-handedly runs our Twitter page. Although he has annoyed me, to be honest. I said to him that, obviously jokingly, I said, Reggie, when you upload the videos to YouTube, make sure you run antivirus software. Just a stupid joke. And he then sent me an invoice for a subscription to Norton Antivirus. So yeah, a tough crowd is intern Reggie, but cheers for uploading the videos. So that's pretty much it for the Stand and Deliver Comedy Podcast. But I thought I'd just share one more thing with you. If you are struggling with lockdown, which I think I definitely am, and everyone is pretty much, I thought I'd just share with you very quickly something that's helping me. And don't worry, I'm not going to turn into Russell Brand. I won't suddenly think I'm an intellectual and start lecturing you every week, because I know you come to this podcast because it's a comedy podcast, albeit a podcast about comedy. The last thing you want is your comedy club going all serious. Don't worry, I'm not capable of doing that. And also, what I'm about to say might be blooming obvious, but what I found really useful is just becoming really, really short-termist, because I found I've got most stressed and fed up when I've started looking ahead and worrying about how long this might go on for, and then I just feel really, really awful. So what I've been doing, I've been planning, but only a couple of days ahead a couple of days at a time, because it's really nice to have something to look forward to. For example, at the end of last week, I had a digital pub crawl with some of my mates, which was great fun, although now my bedroom floor does resemble a bottle bank. But it's really good just to have something in your calendar to look forward to like that. But I'm only really planning a couple of days ahead. For example, today I had this podcast to record, so I was really looking forward to that. And earlier on, I did some exercise in the garden, so that was nice. If I just focus on the here and now and try not to look at the big scary picture, then that's helping me. Hopefully that will help you too. I don't know, I just thought I'd share it just in case it's useful. And what would be really useful for me if you guys wrote me a nice review on iTunes. Yeah, that's right, I had to get the good old bucket speech in there. Yeah, but seriously, if you write a nice review on iTunes or do something as simple as share a link to this podcast on Facebook, then that gets more ears on the podcast and encourages me to make more of them. This is episode 25, so if you're feeling bored, then there is a whole 24 brilliant episodes, including interviews with Steve and Alan from The MASH Report, Robert White from Britain's Got Talent, all sorts of amazingly interesting people. So have a listen if you feel like it. And, well, that pretty much wraps it up. This is Rodders, signing out.